If you give yourself to making the best of your role in life, you'll find a great deal of happiness. You can be anything you want to be.
She was a tireless advocate for those struggling.
You'll never know how much we miss you.
A 24-hour News 8 special of First Lady's Farewell.
And thank you so much for joining us tonight for this special tribute to First Lady Betty Ford, A First Lady's Farewell. I'm Brian Sterling.
And I'm Susan Shaw. Tonight, after nearly a week of tearful goodbyes, fond memories, and solemn ceremonies, Betty Ford has been laid to rest next to her husband at the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Museum in Grand Rapids.
To celebrate her life, we are taking the next hour and devoting it to the difference that Mrs. Ford made in our country and our community. You'll hear from the Ford family, those who knew the First Lady well, and from you, the community who took its time to pay its respects.
We start with today's funeral service, and 24-hour News 8's Leon Hendricks was inside the Grace Episcopal Church in East Grand Rapids, and he joins us now live.
Susan and Brian, good evening. It was an absolutely beautiful service, very appropriate crowd on hand. Some national dignitaries as well as some local ones all coming to pay their respects to the First Lady. And also some people in the crowd that we didn't know.
It seemed as though there were more smiles than tears at times, though there were plenty of the latter. So much to say, a triple eulogy in order. Her son Stephen led the way.
We were really blessed because we got a mother, Dad got a wife that, man, she just knew how to love. And she was the first one there to put her arms around you.
Then Lynn Cheney, wife of former Vice President Dick Cheney. The other, a masterful presidential historian and biographer, Richard Norton Smith, who also eulogized President Ford years back.
When I was around Mrs. Ford, what always struck me was how so many incredible things could happen to one person. From suburban life to the White House in a space of 10 months and still leave her unchanged.
Not content to make history, she became one of those rare figures who make a difference, a lasting difference in our public culture and in our private lives.
But beyond all that, the little memories that no one knows. There's the times that she shared with the world, and she shared so much. But only they'll know, Mike, Jack, Steve, and Susan, the mom moments and the intimate times we never saw.
Thank you, Mom, for loving us, loving your husband, loving us kids, loving the nation with the heart of God. We miss you. God bless you.
Down the aisle at Grace Episcopal for the last time, the First Lady made her way, and for years and generations to come, she has made her mark.
Susan told me earlier today that she'd gone in early July to visit her mom on her, Susan's, birthday, and that her mom from her bed had sung her happy birthday. And I know with what love she did it. And I like to think that today, on Gerald Ford's birthday, she is singing to him in heaven.
And things here in East Grand Rapids are getting back to normal. Quiet once again, but one can only hope that things will never be the way they were before Betty Ford graced our presence. Live in East Grand Rapids, Leon Hendricks, 24-hour News 8.
After the funeral in East Grand Rapids, the motorcade took Betty Ford's body back to the museum to be buried next to President Ford. That ceremony was private, and as such, our cameras were not allowed in, but did capture this scene as the family walked to the burial site. The inscription at the gravesite reads, "Lives committed to God, country, and love." It sits underneath the Colorado blue spruce given to the couple by their children in 1993 on what was their 45th wedding anniversary. 24-hour News 8's Brett Thomas was at the museum as that scene and so many others transpired today. But now the museum is quiet. Brett?
Considerably more quiet, Brian. You can hear the fountain, you can hear the river, you can hear the wind rustling through the trees. With the media on, and you can also see that the Ford family has just arrived here, a number of them arriving to the Ford Museum, making a return of sorts, this time in street clothes. One last final farewell at the building that their mother helped build. Earlier, It was filled with the sounds of bagpipes as Betty Ford was carried across the front of the building. She, in so many ways, helped build this place. She went past the statue of her husband and our president. She was laid to rest on the north side of this property next to Gerald R. Ford. It was a private ceremony, an intimate moment for just the family, a family that spent the last week on the public stage. And now, after weeks worth of ceremonies and travel, the journey is now over on this property that sits across the river from Grand Rapids. Betty Ford has been laid to rest. It was a promise that was made and a promise that was kept. We are live in Grand Rapids. I'll send it back to you, Brian.
Brett, thank you. He was President of the United States. She was First Lady, an activist and a role model.
Betty and Gerald Ford had many titles, but it's likely the most important one to them was Mom and Dad.
24-hour News 8's political reporter Rick Albin has spent time with the Ford children over the years and joins us now to talk about how that family dealt with living in a fishbowl and still trying to keep a normal family life.
You know, I have been pleased to know the Ford family over a number of years and just spent a short period of time with them about an hour or so ago. I'm still amazed at how well they handle all of this so very publicly, and you know the kind of private grief. Well, the demands of political office, much less the highest office in the country, can be daunting. But so can raising 4 children. Betty and Gerald Ford seem to find the right balance, and in the last few days, we've seen that grace, that the Ford children have handled that private grief I talked about in a very public arena. And they do it with the guidance of 2 parents who took the title Mom and Dad very seriously. We've seen the images, the plane touching down in Grand Rapids, the ceremony. But it's the little things that you may not have noticed that give us an insight of how the 4 children of Gerald and Betty Ford learned some of the same values their famous parents were known for. Respect. Stephen and Michael taking time to shake hands and talk with the Boy Scouts and others who turned out to welcome the First Lady home. Susan, who thanked the flight crew who flew them from California to Michigan. And most of the family at the museum, turning out to thank those who waited outside to pay their respects. The same kind of common touch that Mr. and Mrs. Ford were known for. And when asked what it was like growing up Ford, Mike, Jack, Steve, and Susan give you a bit of insight about an American family living anything but an average life.
But her dedication to Dad and his career, even though she didn't want to be a politician's wife. And the interesting story is, you know, she was the one that was always around because Dad was on the road 100 nights a year campaigning or trying to get other people elected to Congress. And Mom was the one that was home. She was the one that made sure we got to school, got our homework done, got to the dentist, football practice, all those kind of things. And Mom was really the disciplinarian of our family. And so I think Dad would tell you today he thanks Mom the most for raising his family, and a lot of times when he was gone.
And some of the life lessons learned in the Ford household were ones that their children want to incorporate in their own relationships.
It was a wonderful relationship they had, and it was so mutually supportive of each other that, you know, Mother endured the difficult times of politics and so forth, and then after that, Dad was the perfect partner for her, going through her difficult challenges, and to know the love that they experienced was just, you know, something you hope you can experience as well.
Perhaps more than anything in that house in Alexandria, the 4 Fords were taught to be their own person.
I think with Mother, it's as much speak your mind. And not only tell the truth, but express yourself. And don't be pushed around and don't let people stampede you. But also give a helping hand. And I think that's really what she kind of always got the downtrodden.
And in talking with Susan and talking with the other family members, you know, it really was that guidance of their mother, because she started, you know, even when she was very young, before she was married to Gerald Ford, she had a dance class And in order to keep that dance class going and helping underprivileged kids here in Grand Rapids, she took a second job so she could pay for the class itself, because obviously they couldn't pay for the classes. And that was a very young woman. So I mean, this kind of dedication and service to her community is something that wasn't some late found passion. It was something that she lived all of her life.
Yeah, she was a dancer. Grace and balance. Thank you, Rick. The Ford's son, Stephen, who you heard from just moments ago, spoke at today's funeral service. He talked about his mother's role in his life when he was battling alcoholism himself, and provided this moment of levity.
19 years ago, when I went through my alcoholism, my mother was the first one there for me to comfort me like she comforted so many others. And she was the first one there, and it was actually funny because I remember going to my mom and saying, "Mom, I know you've walked in these shoes already. I think I'm an alcoholic." And she was just like every other mother in the country. She said, "Oh no, my son's not an alcoholic. You can't be an alcoholic." I said, "Mom, stop. You can't be in denial. You're like Betty Ford, you know. You're like the poster child for this thing." So, but she was just like every other mother in the country.
Big part of the last couple of days for the family and the city has been the elaborate motorcades that took Betty Ford from the airport to the museum, from the museum to the church, and from the church to her burial site. 24-hour News 8 Steve Kelso had the privilege of being the only television reporter to ride in the motorcade this afternoon. And Steve joins us in studio now with what that was like. Steve?
Privilege is exactly it, Sue. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me to ride in the procession of a First Lady. As I was waiting to get in the Lincoln Navigator that was to serve as my ride, the entire Ford family arrived at the museum. After a short family ceremony inside, the procession was underway. Hundreds and hundreds of people lined the streets of Grand Rapids to pay tribute to Mrs. Ford. If you can, forget for a moment that she was ever a First Lady. Then she is a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. And the view that I am privileged to have witnessed is the same as her children and grandchildren are seeing. And I could only imagine what a tremendous comfort it must have been to her family to see all of these people feel so strongly about her that they took their time to come out and pay tribute to her. I was only allowed to shoot video up to the church. The family wanted to keep the procession back to the museum private. After grieving the loss of Betty Ford so publicly for so many days, they wanted their last moments with their mother to be spent alone. Brian?
Thank you, Steve. It seemed fitting that Betty Ford ended her journey in Grand Rapids today next to her husband. Today would have been President Ford's 98th birthday, and each year a wreath is placed at his gravesite for just that occasion. For years, Wood TV has live streamed the wreath laying at the request of Betty Ford. She wanted to watch it from California. This is video of that ceremony from last year. Today, the wreath laying was private, and tonight, the couple reunited once again.
Gerald and Betty Ford's marriage has taken center stage over the past few days. In fact, several eulogists spoke about that marriage and that incredible devotion during today's funeral.
Their story has come to an end, and now we've said farewell to both of them. But for the rest of our days, we will cherish all that was and be thankful that we knew and loved Betty and Jerry Ford.
More than once in recent years, Mrs. Ford asked her children, "When are you going to let me go be with my boyfriend?" Today, her wish is granted.
Well, you take one marriage, mix in 4 kids, health issues, a presidency, and you've got the makings of a challenging matrimony.
But the Fords took it in stride. 24-hour News 8's Joe LaFurgie is live at the Ford Presidential Museum with that part of their story tonight. Joe?
Yeah, Sue, Brian, you know, even with all those pressures, Betty and Jerry Ford's marriage seemed to strengthen with every challenge. The year was 1948. The country was dusting itself off from the war that freed Europe and getting back to peacetime prosperity. In October of that year, newly elected U.S. Congressman Gerald Ford and department store fashion coordinator Betty Bloomer were married. The union would last 58 years.
Mother endured the difficult times of politics and so forth, and then after that, Dad was the perfect partner for her going through her difficult challenges. and to know the love that they experienced was just, you know, something you hope you can experience as well.
The Fords eventually built a house in suburban Washington where they raised their family. Betty was the ultimate, if not reluctant, political wife.
But her dedication to Dad and his career, even though she didn't want to be a politician's wife. And the interesting story is, you know, she was the one that was always around because Dad was on the road 100 nights a year campaigning or trying to get other people elected to Congress. And Mom was the one that was home. She was the one that made sure we got to school, got our homework done, got to the dentist, football practice, all those kind of things. And Mom was really the disciplinarian of our family. And so I think Dad would tell you today he thanks Mom the most for raising his family at a lot of times when he was gone.
Through the ups and downs, the marriage worked. The kids grew up. Jerry became minority leader in the House. They eventually realized their shared dream of Republicans gaining control of the House and Jerry becoming Speaker would not be realized.
Finally, she's got him committed to, he's going to retire, we're going to move back to Grand Rapids, he's going to have a nice quiet life as a lawyer in Grand Rapids. And during his last term in Congress, that's when Nixon called, asked him to be vice president. And I can remember Mom talking to Dad, and she was not happy at all that he was going to continue his political career. And I remember my dad saying, Betty, don't worry about it. You know, vice presidents don't do anything. It'll be a nice, quiet situation. We'll serve our 2.5, 3 years. We'll all go home together back to Grand Rapids. Well, history obviously changed a little bit.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Richard Nixon resigned in disgrace. The heavy burden of leading a nation in crisis fell to the gentleman from Michigan. The family moved to the White House. And that partnership that led to their successful family and political life would continue, although Betty didn't always get her way.
I think that the one that really affected the females in our family, I'll stand for the females, is trying to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed, which of course never happened. Mother worked extremely hard for that, and you know, she would have liked to have had a woman on the Supreme Court and knew all those things were coming. And so when Dad didn't appoint a female, she was a little disappointed. But she still had the pillow talk to, you know, sit there and go, they may have gone to sleep, but I'm still right here. So in that sense, the Equal Rights Amendment would have been really, really nice. But it didn't happen, and that's okay. We're still fighting.
And Betty Ford went public with a lot of her opinions.
I think the staff was more concerned about it than President Ford. And so they had this independent relationship. She didn't mind going to him saying, you know, you got to do something about ERA. You got to do something about having a female on the Supreme Court.
Through it all, the marriage endured. Both the President and Mrs. Ford shared their keys to success in marriage. Jerry once wrote, "There must be understanding, compassion, and emotion which fits under the umbrella of love. A marriage that has these attributes can weather the storm clouds that are inevitable in an intimate relationship. There must be a belief on the part of both that there is nothing of a higher priority than the sanctity and continuation of the relationship." Betty called it a 30-70 proposition. In other words, here I'm giving 70, he can give 30. He's giving 70, I give 30. When you're going overboard trying to please each other, you can't help but be happy. It was a love that remained strong after President Ford died in 2006. Marty Allen remembers his last visit with Betty Ford at the home she and the president shared.
She says, see that olive tree over there? We decorate that with white lights for Christmas. I left them there intact because I turn them on every night to know that he will know I'm all right. Now she doesn't have to worry about that anymore.
That doesn't get you right here. I don't know what will. Coming up in a few minutes, we will take a look at her role as the First Lady. Live from Gerald R. Ford Presidential Museum, Joe LaFurgey, 24-Hour News 8.
Thank you so much, Joe. As expected, Betty's funeral and homecoming, they've differed slightly from Gerald Ford's state funeral. Let's talk quickly about those differences, and the first would be just that aspect alone, right?
Yeah, and that really is the biggest difference. And what that means is that when a president of the United States, former president of the United States, dies, is the military district of Washington really comes in to take over a lot of the logistics. They bring in, you saw the cannons for the salute, they bring in the military color guard. All of these things are coordinated because he was a president of the United States, and there are certain honors that are afforded a president of the United States. In the case of the First Lady of the United States, the same type of courtesy is not extended. In the case of this First Lady, and I would suggest most First Ladies, whoever it is that is planning the funeral for the president, and in this case, there were a number of people that were involved in both the plannings, they probably planned them relatively the same. And in this case, they were going to take place in the same town, they were going to be buried in the same place, they were both from here, and so there were a lot of similarities. Changes: Mrs. Ford did not go to Washington. You didn't have the same military trappings, as she didn't serve in the military and was never commander-in-chief. So some of those things changed. Now, there you see a picture of President Clinton, former President Clinton, I believe, former Vice President Dick Cheney. As far as those people who showed up to pay their respects, every first family since Eisenhower, as you pointed out, Brian, was represented in California, plus the folks that we had here. So there were a lot more similarities than differences. The one similarity that I would suggest is the public involvement, the family's interest in making sure the city and people of Grand Rapids and West Michigan were involved. They accomplished that again. And the other thing I would suggest is that they wanted people to know what President Ford accomplished. They wanted people to get reinvigorated, reinterested in his life, and I believe they want the same with First Lady Betty Ford, and I think they've taken a quantum leap towards that because there's been so much conversation about who she is and what she accomplished. I would suggest the interest in First Lady Betty Ford will be on the rise for a while.
Absolutely. I think you're right. All right, Rick, thank you. So much of the former First Lady's homecoming is a story about you. It's about the community who welcomed her home to join her husband, President Gerald Ford, at their final resting place. We want to take this opportunity now to hear from the people who took time out of their busy schedules to view Betty as she lied in repose at the Ford Presidential Museum.
She would say real, I think, quirky things that just come out. I mean, she wasn't afraid to say things. I mean, a woman might have thought about it, but wouldn't have done it back then. But she just would say it. That part I really liked about her. Yeah.
She's a legend here, and we understand that and realize that. So we just want to, again, show our condolences by coming in and signing the book, kind of be part of history.
I like the way she handled her children as they were just youngsters and teenagers and then grown-ups. She still could tell them what to do.
Her positions on women's rights and on women's health and opening the doors to dialogue and discussion for women, just invaluable. Absolutely a wonderful position to take. And her example of leadership for the role of First Ladies cannot be matched, and she's one of the best.
Well said.
Several high-profile people, as mentioned, did attend today's ceremony in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, it was another one of those times when you see the first families turn out to pay respect to other first families. There's Barbara Bush from Bush 41, and she is both the mother and wife of a president, which is a rare combination. You saw Dick Cheney, I think Don Rumsfeld you saw just a moment ago, former Vice President Dick Cheney there, Lynn Cheney, his wife, who delivered the eulogy, Brent Scrocroft we saw earlier. A number of people that were there in that audience that you might recognize by sight, not just those dignitaries. There's David Kennerly, who is certainly in his own right a very famous photographer, but all of those folks were there to not so much be seen, but to pay the respects to the First Lady, and the media was all over the place. So there were satellite trucks, live trucks from all over the place. All networks had one, which is a little unusual because sometimes they rely on us to feed them that, but I think all of the major networks had trucks from several places around the United States. We had one of our sister stations up from Indianapolis helping us, and for those who weren't here, this was fed around the globe, so people had these images and have been talking about this over the past week or so, because Betty Ford was not just someone known in the United States, but her work is known around the globe, particularly when it comes to substance abuse and those clinics that have been opened around the world to deal with it, because it is a problem in so many countries in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an undertaking and a great response and turnout today.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rick. Some did watch today's funeral at Grace Episcopal Church on television. Some traveled from far away, and a select few were inside.
24-hour News 8's Ryan Takeo shows us the story of one East Grand Rapids resident who got a glimpse at history just because of where she lives.
Out Janine Borden's front door is a front seat to a farewell.
And you live
right across the street here.
She's lived near Grace Episcopal for 5 years. She remembers President Ford's funeral there in '07, watching from her front lawn. Thursday, she took the day off, hoping to take history in. Neighbors living across the street from the church say you almost have to make the most of this moment.
We're not going to have this experience again.
And the moment brought a surprise.
He said, "You'll need to have that when you come in."
Have a ticket like Janine Borden. Remember, she's not family, just a neighbor to the church. But there's a platform for TV crews right in her front lawn. So this morning, the Ford family tried to make amends.
This is a thank you for letting us overtake your property.
Afterwards, Borden was still in shock, surprised by what she witnessed and who she witnessed it with. But she held her own.
Several people asked how I knew them and him, and I said I didn't. I said, actually, you people are a very small segment of knowing him, and I represent a larger segment of people that know them from a different point of view.
Borden said she had to take the chance.
It was somber, it was sad, and yet it was delightful, and laughter. I wish you could have heard some of the laughter out here. It was very, very special.
That special seat, through her front door, past her old seat, no walls between her and history. In East Grand Rapids, Ryan Takeo, 24-Hour News 8.
What a neat story.
That is a great story. And by the way, we've heard so many great stories. I know we continue for another half hour. I think that there are those who believe I've been on television enough in the past week, and so I take my leave. It has been a pleasure to sit at this desk with the two of you during a very important historic moment here in Grand Rapids. We got a lot more special coming up, but thanks for letting me share the desk.
Rick, we couldn't have done it without you.
Absolutely, Rick.
Excellent job.
Fantastic.
Right after the break, Betty Ford's life as First Lady, the story of one of her Secret Service agents, her battle with breast cancer and addiction.
But first, a glimpse into today's funeral service.
I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though this body be destroyed, yet shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold, and not as a stranger. For none of us liveth to himself, and no man dieth to himself. For if we live unto the Lord, and if we die unto the Lord. Whether we live therefore or die, we are.